Hi, I'm Patricia Grabarek.
And I'm Katina Sawyer, and welcome to the Worker Being Podcast.
Today, we are so excited to be joined by Serena Johnson, who is the founder of Ladies Who Do Cool Shit. How are you doing, Serena?
I'm doing very well. How are you, ladies?
Great. We're so excited to have you. We're very excited to talk to you and get to know a little bit about your journey and the amazing wellness tips you have for our listeners.
I'm super excited to be here and talk about that.
Yeah, so I know that the name of your podcast is very cool and interesting and provocative. So could you tell us a little bit about what is Ladies Who Do Cool Shit?
Yeah, totally. So Ladies Who Do Cool Shit is primarily a platform for women to come together and just figure out their career shit. Like we spend so much time of our life working, and I wanted a community where women could come and find like help and support figuring out what they wanted to do. So there's like 3 ways they can do this. If you're based in Los Angeles, I host meetups at my house twice a month where women come together and we celebrate our achievements and celebrate and like set goals for the future. I have my podcast where you can hear stories of women on their career journeys. And then I also do private career coaching, specifically helping women navigate career transitions. So it's just like this place for women to find support in that, because it's harder than I feel like most people think it is, like to make career moves and transitions. So
Totally. And I would imagine that hearing stories about how other people have done that or have made their way through those navigations or ways that people have started their own thing or made their own path or journey probably helps to inspire a lot of other people. Have you seen that be the case so far?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, basically, the podcast came out of the idea because I was listening to How I Built This, which I love. It's such a good and it's super inspirational. But I also was like, I want to hear stories of women who are in the thick of it, because it's really hard when you are, 5 rejection emails deep and like aren't making money and just like frustrated and with things around you, to hear people talk about like these businesses they've built and these careers that they've had, and they have sold their company for $2 billion, and you're like, this, I cannot relate to this. So I wanted something that women could relate to, and for any different industry. So whether you're pivoting, whether you're are on like the school path, there's so many stories out there, and I just wanted to amplify all of those voices.
I find it super inspirational listening to your podcast because, Katina and I, obviously, we've started Worker Being. So we're entrepreneurs and trying to figure out that journey and what that looks like. And I do think it's really interesting to hear other people's stories, because you're right. Listening to some of those more aspirational stories are great. But a lot of times I'm like, okay, well, you haven't really talked about how you got from the very beginning to where you are today. They might talk about it briefly, but we don't get like the deep stories. And I think some of the people that you feature have really interesting stories, and it feels more relatable in terms of what we're going through and what we see, because we may have gone through some of those challenges and relate, and the other times we're like, oh, that might come up for us, and we're really curious to hear what people do.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like I mean, you nailed it. Like, there is that like portion of time when you're starting something versus like mid-career, or like kind of like, okay, I'm making money at this, or like I'm trying to find this career transition that just nobody talks about, because they all want to get to like the end goal when they have this like large company. Like they want to get to like, oh, and then we like sold it, and like what was the process of trying to sell your baby and things like that. And I want to know about, and they touch on the hard nights, but there's almost like a disconnect because it was so far away. And like I believe that they struggled and were like had these like staying up all night crying and failures, and just like we all go through. But I really wanted to have a voice for women to like that who are going through it now, who can be like, oh, she's like, I can literally follow her on Instagram, she's a real person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially for women too, there are so many standards for just everything having to be just so, like you have to have really great career goals, and you really have to have like a perfect family that you can send like the beautiful, holiday card of every year.
Mhm.
And you have to, have a nice house that's well decorated and clean, and like all this stuff that, women are held accountable for. And I think that, it can be really nice to recognize that that doesn't just happen, and B, it is not reality, and C, there are a lot of people that help people to get to the point that they are there. And sometimes I think once you're at that point where you feel like, you're in a place that you're happy with, it can be easy to look back and forget like all the little things that happen to get you where you are. And so it's nice to talk to people who are on their way, because it's still top of mind. And I think, might be relieving for a lot of women who are just kind of looking at all these different aspects and thinking, how am I going to do all this?
Yeah, 100%. And like I've had friends who text me who are just like, I'm so inspired by the fact that like these women are doing this and figuring it out, and it makes me feel less alone. Because I came from an arts background. So a lot of the women I've been interviewing are just like honestly from my immediate circle. And so we were primarily were artists at one point who have come out, like done other things. That not all of my guests, but a lot of them are. And it's been really interesting to see how, there's so many shifts in our careers, and like how, I guess, like how everyone does it. Everyone pivots their careers, I feel like, so often, especially in this day and age. Like when I think that I read something that like we're going to have like 7 or 8 different career shifts in our lives, whatever that is. And so for people to be so scared of them and to not know how to embrace them and deal with, all the emotions that come up with it, it's really interesting. So I'm super happy to have such diverse stories on my podcast that showcase like you literally can do whatever you want. It's a little hard work, and but like making a change is normal and totally like, yeah, it's gonna happen. So embrace the change,
From your change and then from all the people that you've spoken to, is there a theme? Have you learned anything that maybe our listeners can think about in terms of taking care of themselves emotionally
Ooh.
as they're going through a transition?
Ooh, that is a good question. I feel like there's so much I could say on that. One theme I think is just really being true to yourself. Like really be not like you said, like what Instagram or your parents um or what outside pressure is telling you, but like really get clear about what you want, and use that as a guide to to navigate your transition, because we all know deep down inside what we want, and if you start feeding that and leaning into that, you're just so much happier and healthier with your choices. Like if you don't want to commute an hour, don't take the job that makes you commute an hour. Like
Mhm.
I just feel like it's such a basic, it seems so simple, but it's so hard to do, to really get clear about what you actually want in your life and going for that. Um, and also just be kind to yourself. I think mindset is so, so important. And whenever you're making a career transition, like your mind can be a really messy place, and it's probably the thing that beats you up the most. So be kind to yourself, because it's hard. It's really hard. And it's easy to get in your head about it.
Yeah, I like that
Definitely.
idea of sort of taking the time to allow yourself to get there. I think, especially if you're a person who considers themselves like a high achiever, you want to be able to, make an impact right away. You're really passionate or motivated about what you're doing. Like all of those things, I think can really like start to weigh on you if you're feeling like things aren't happening as quickly as you want. And I think that,
Oh, yeah.
when people sort of, even when people tell their narratives back, it's like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, because people are trying to make the story succinct so that people can get the gist. But it also gets rid of a lot of important, like downtime, waiting time, things like that, that it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen fast. And so kind of allowing people to feel okay with that, that this is going to take time, but it'll be worth it, I think is really important.
Oh my God, patience. Ugh, I hate that saying patience is a virtue. It is not my virtue at all. The amount of pressure, like, it's moving slowly is something it's so hard to do.
Yeah.
I would like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm an immediate person. That's something I struggle with on a regular basis. I was like, why isn't my client list full like right now? I posted this yesterday, and as somebody who's like, uh, I'm very immediate in my action. So it's that has been super interesting. Um, and I know a lot of people like that.
Definitely a learning for us too. I think, especially when we first started worker being, Katina and I also were very antsy. We still are. I can't say that we're not, but
Oh, it never goes away, right? You're like,
Yeah.
why isn't this perfect? Like, why am I not like making my entire salary off? Like it's very like, oh, why isn't this happening right now?
Totally.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally. And like knowing that it
Yeah.
might take like 3 years, 5 years
Yeah.
Yeah.
is like, oh, okay, well, yep, I'm here for it, but
Yeah.
damn.
It hurts for sure, but then I think it's good to listen to all those other stories about people that are doing the same thing and realizing how long it takes, because that gives you some comfort in that. Because, yeah, I think we're very driven people and we're very focused on our end goals, and it's hard to really sit back and think, okay, we have done a lot. A lot has been accomplished, even if we're not at our final stage. Like, that's okay. The journey is part of this too. And speaking of journeys, I want to hear a little bit about yours and how you transitioned into, everything that you're doing now, from your previous life, and why you made those decisions.
Yeah, that has been an interesting journey for sure. So I actually started out as an opera singer. I wanted to sing opera since I was like 16. I was like a total theater nut and theater kid. And I got my degree in opera, and it took me forever to get my degree. So I always say this because I want like people to know that like it took me 8.5 years to get my bachelor's because school's not my jam, and I just wanted to sing. And so, like, so by the time I graduated, with my BA, I was like 26. So I was like ready to be in the workforce. I realized after that 8.5 years that like singing was not something I wanted to do. Like being an artist, actually, the lifestyle and what you had to do and what I had to do to become competitive was like no longer of interest to me. It wasn't something that was going to make me happy. Um, and that was a super interesting identity shift after being an opera singer for, my most of my late teen years and early 20s. So then I went into arts administration because I needed to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I didn't want to be a bartender and a server anymore. So I went into arts administration and threw myself into that world. I joined a group called Emerging Arts Leaders of Los Angeles, and I found a paid internship which turned into a full-time gig. And fundraising was the thing that I really resonated with because I'm a big people person. I love talking with them, and that's kind of a huge part of what fundraising is. So I started doing that and did that for about 6 years. And last August, I left my full time job because I had reached a point where I was something called a major gifts officer, and the next kind of path was either to continue being a major gifts officer and just work for larger size organizations because I worked for a very small one, and kind of that was that career trajectory. And I have applied for like 6 jobs, got to the final for like a couple of them, got called back for interviews for a whole bunch of them. And I'm really good at interviewing, and I wasn't getting any of these jobs. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I am usually
Yeah.
really good at this. And I realized like my heart wasn't in it. Like the things I was going to have to do to become a six-figure like major gift officer, I just didn't want that lifestyle. And I really started thinking about during this entire process, which was like a year, like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, what are the things that I enjoy doing, and what do I get excited about? And I realized that it wasn't the job itself. Like, there were aspects of the job, but really what I love was professional development. Like, I love professional development. I love mentors. I have always had a mentor, even when I was an opera singer. Like, I was like that person that made friends with my teachers, because I just like wanted to like pick their brain in a professional manner and like um and so I realized that with Emerging Arts Leaders, which was a professional or is a professional development and networking volunteer organization, and I ran that as a volunteer, and I'm on the advisory board, and now I'm a mentor for their protege program. And like it made a lot of sense. And I kept trying to get into that industry in different ways in the nonprofit sector. But I realized like I don't like working for people. I'm not great at working for people. So
Mm-hmm.
um I thought about it and thought, well, maybe I'll freelance and I'll figure this out. So I quit my full-time job, got a part-time job as a development director, had a super toxic boss. And after 2 months, I was like, and I'm done. I'm just gonna figure this out. Um and Ladies Who Do Cool Shit was the kind of the end of that journey of me putting together all the things I know I'm good at, the things I'm passionate about, the skills that I wanted to leverage on a day-to-day basis, and yeah, and that's how I came into that. And the name Ladies Who Do Cool Shit actually came about because one of the most important things was that I got to be myself, and I am a very loud, um, I don't want to say abrasive, but yeah, abrasive female who is, kind of in your face, and you kind of are like, I'm a love lover or hater type of person, and I wanted a brand that expressed the type of energy I have. And so I cuss a lot. I say profane, I have tattoos and like a crazy hairstyle. So I was like Ladies Who Do Cool Shit actually came about over a martini before an opera with my boyfriend and one of my friends. Because I tried to have a different podcast name and I didn't realize that Lady Boss or Boss Girl was like,
Girl
I
boss.
think it was
Yep.
Boss Girl. That's that brand, right? I forget. But I wanted
Girl
Girl
boss.
Boss. Yeah. And I wanted something like Lady Boss Podcast. I knew I wanted to interview women on their career journeys. And an Uber driver was like, "Isn't there something called Girl Boss?" And I felt like everything was shattered. And so I remember I was like, I
Oh.
was complaining, and I was like, we had like a martini in, and I was like, all I want to do is talk to ladies who do cool shit. How hard is that? And my friend Sean turned to me and was like, I think that's the name. And I was like, is it the name? And I just kind of sat on it for a month, and I was like, yeah, I think that's the name. And then that was
That's
just supposed to be a
awesome.
podcast, and I incorporated everything else because I was already career coaching, and I also had this meetup, and I just put it all in one brand because it's everything that I
All
love
fits
doing.
together.
It all fits together. Women can come and participate in any aspect that they like. Um, and yeah, it's actually helped my career coaching a lot because women automatically identify with that brand. So it's
That's
been super
awesome.
cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, I
Could
like
not be
how you
Really?
even
happier.
talked about the
So
different, trials and
That's
tribulations of trying to come up with what you want your path to be, and really that like internal kind of soul searching that you had to do to figure out, what is it that you actually like doing, and sort of sitting back and starting from scratch and saying, okay, I know that this isn't necessarily the path that I thought isn't necessarily the path that I'm going to take, but what do I want the path to look like? And being really deliberate about that, I think is really cool and a good takeaway
yes.
for folks to sort of try to do that in their daily lives as well, to sort of take some time to step back and say, okay, where am I? Where do I want to be? Am I actually leveraging what I'm good at? Is there a way that I could incorporate more of what I'm passionate about into my work? Maybe if it's not as dramatic a shift, it could even just be more minor things, like how do I get more of what I love doing into my daily work life. So speaking of all of that, how do you so you're doing all of this stuff, you're really passionate about it, but it does take a lot of work to start a new venture, as we were just discussing. So do you have any tips about how you maintain your own wellness, or things that you do to make sure that you're taking care of yourself in this journey?
Oh yeah. I mean, I actually take weekends, and I don't usually work at night. Like I work at, and which might sound like duh. If you have a 9 to 5, that might be easier, but I think the entrepreneur, like the solopreneur kind of field, is very like hustle till you die. Like if you're not pouring every single thing into it, then you are not working hard enough. And I don't subscribe to that. Let's be real. Like the main reason I work from home and I started my thing is because I don't want to work 24 hours. And like my partner and I talk about this a lot. And like, we're both
Mm-hmm.
people who like, we want to enjoy our life. So um I really deliberately take weekends. I mean, obviously there's the cases where I work at night. Like um my clients are usually have a 9 to 5. So I work early mornings sometimes, and I work nights, and I might take some time on the weekend to work with a client if that's the only time that she has available. But I make sure
Mm-hmm.
I make that up in the week. So I'm not working 24/7. Um, I'm really deliberate with my
Mhm.
choices and the extra projects I take on. So like and also for example, like I'm really conscious about if something isn't working anymore, figure out why and see if it's still necessary. Just because I started something and just because, like, my podcast was supposed to be weekly, and I was realizing how draining it was trying to do a podcast every single week. And I just don't have the resources to
Mhm.
do it every week anymore. So now I do it every other week. And that's okay. you know, Nothing is going to suffer because of that. So just allowing myself to have space for me. Um, I mean, I'm still trying to like figure out like working out and like bringing those things into my life. But yeah, just being really honest with how I want to work and like what fuels me and and how I have the most energy and like honoring that first and then having the work come through after that.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a really great tip, just being honest with yourself and honest with the time that you want to spend where and how. Obviously, if you're working for somebody else, you might have less flexibility in that, but still trying to set up those boundaries is really important.
Oh,
We talk
yeah.
about that all the time.
Because if
Yeah,
you're
we talk
working
about
for
all
someone else, like, you can still set boundaries, and you can still,
exactly.
like and if they're not honoring those boundaries, then maybe it's time you think about finding a new place that actually fits the lifestyle. I always say this to my clients, and it's kind of like my I guess my manifesto, I don't know, my mantra, I don't know. Find a career, like, find a career that fits you and your life. Don't fit yourself into a career. Because when you fit yourself into a career, you're going to end up with burnout, you're going to end up being exhausted, you're going to end up doing things that don't actually like fuel you. I think we have this thing that you have to be super passionate about your work, and like if you're not doing the thing that you love constantly, then clearly you're not in the right path. But I think it's more just about finding work that adds to your life and works with what you actually want your life to look like, rather than you like
Mhm.
fitting yourself into
Yeah.
somebody's need, what they need. And sometimes that means going try it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of like figuring out what you like and what you don't like. It's not like a quick fix, but it took me how long to get to this point. Um so, and it really like defining your values. I don't that's at the basis of how my coaching and like where we come from, because it's I think I truly believe that it makes the difference
Yeah, we've
to
talked
burn out and to
before
like mental health.
in our podcast about how some people are really driven by purpose and meaning on the job, and other folks like that. Some people really like feel like they need to have a calling, and other folks might not feel that the actual content of their job needs to be the thing that drives them. It could be that their job is, very flexible, and maybe they like the fact that they don't have a lot of work demands, and so they can spend more time doing things that they really want to do. So I think you're right. It's not just about like, oh, a one size fits all for everybody. It's like really taking stock of what works for you and what you want to prioritize, and then finding a way to make your work fit that.
Yeah, 100%. Like I 1000% agree, because I think it's each of us are our own unique butterflies or whatever, unique versions of ourselves. And so to really lean in heavily to like what you actually want in life, like if that's working 4 days a week, or part-time, and you can financially afford that and that serves your purpose, then awesome. And if it means working remotely 24 hours a day in like in the middle of nowhere, where in the woods, then go live that life. Like if you don't want to be around people, then don't be around people. Like don't try and fit into whatever version of whatever you think society is telling you to
Yeah,
be in, because it's not
totally.
fun for anyone. Let's be real. Like, no one wants that. Like you're miserable, then people
Yeah,
around you are
totally.
miserable. Just like, you do you.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you think our listeners should know before we sign off here?
Yeah, no. I mean, you can find me at www.ladieswhodocoolshit.com, and like all the stuff is there if they want to join the podcast, subscribe to the podcast, or like are actually interested in a career transition and are like, I need help, I don't know what to do with my life. I'm like, just like, girl, I got you, don't worry, it'll be fine. Let's figure it out. Yeah, and if you're in Los Angeles and want to come to my meetups, like hit me up, I would love it.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yes, we'll link to everything in the show notes so everyone can find you.
Thank
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I think it's really relatable to a lot of people, and a lot of the points you talked about are things we
Yeah.
talked about that are based in research too. So I'm glad that it all fabulously aligns. Thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you guys.
We were so happy to have Serena on the show today. She is an awesome person. And if you want any more information on her, you can find it all in the show notes. We've got all the links. Listen to our podcast, Ladies Who Do Cool Shit. It's a really fun and motivating and inspiring podcast, and we really recommend it for everyone to listen. If you want to reach out to us, you can always find us on social media at WorkerBeing. You can email us at workerbeing@gmail.com. And you can find us on our website at workerbeing.com. Thanks for listening. The Worker Being podcast is hosted by us, Patricia Grabara
And Katina Sawyer, and produced by Allie Johnson.